Bam! What is going on, folks? MC is in the house. My name is Justin Garcia, also known as Master Chim, and welcome to the Warrior Stream. I'm here every Wednesday, noon Eastern Standard Time, usually for about an hour. I find a topic, I do a somewhat of a deep dive on it, usually here about an hour, give or take, and I have a good time while doing it. Some housekeeping, as they say, masterchim.com. All the relevant links are in the description. I am streaming on YouTube, a couple of pages on Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter. I think the name went from Twitter to X, formerly known as Twitter. And you can find all the links in the descriptions. What else? I think that's about it. All right, let's see who's on so far. Jesse, what's up? Corey, what's up? Cherrytown Vibe, what up? Good to see you, my friend. Everybody there is on YouTube. Any of the people watching on Facebook, do me a favor and just let me know that you could hear me properly. I got a pretty, I think, valuable talk planned today, a topic that... Tony, thank you. Appreciate that. Willie, what up? And I think that the topic that I have planned for today is going to be of value to everybody listening. I was on my mastermind group's call this morning, and I was talking about this talk that I was going to do, and I told them that it's turning out that most of the stuff that I talk about, I've been talking about at a great depth for years at this point. And a lot of these positions are very much established and fleshed out, and they've grown from when I first started even addressing these issues with men through my coaching, first through my martial arts school, and then later on in my coaching programs and such. But as it is now, whenever I have one of these talks planned, the topic, I could just go, like I never really prepare much beyond, when it comes to these talks. But the thing that is always taking 1 to 2 hours is getting that damn thumbnail right. So I have a good time doing it. And it's funny because I'm just fucking anal about those thumbnails and wanting it to be the perfect one. And I was pretty happy with the thumbnail that I wound up getting today for today's talk. Right. Johnny Groove, what up? James, good to see you, my friend. All right. So build yourself first. If you guys have not, if you have not read TRIBALNOMICS yet, the book that I wrote, link is, like I said, down there. You're fucking up, number one. It's not an expensive book. It's not a long book. But it sets the foundation of a certain introspection for a man, whereby he could start asking himself where his life is when using that information put up against it, And one of those very relevant components of what I share in TRIBALNOMICS is the relationship of an individual with himself, and how, aside from its importance and significance, I also added, and it should not be ignored, the priority of that self-alliance, as I term it in the book. So not only is it important, significant, that an individual sort of invest in building a relationship with himself, and then invest in a relationship in actually building himself on top of that. Not only is that the case, but it's also a priority, right? So build yourself first. Now, there's something that that when an individual is trying to find success, is trying to improve his life, and looking at it at the most general of senses, they want to sort of skip priorities. They want to do things out of order. They want to do things in a way whereby they, and I think in today's email, I wrote this, paraphrasing myself, people want sort of really, really big outcomes without ever investing really big inputs. right? They sort of want the thing that comes at the end, but they don't want to build up the thing that starts the process from the beginning. And when I look at an individual, who, in my coaching, I have a lot of, I coach, the majority of people that I coach are entrepreneurs, are men entrepreneurs. My entire mastermind group is for, small business owning men. But my coaching, doesn't only, address entrepreneurs. But a very common theme when I start working with an individual is this understanding that they have, or they think they have, that if I get the outcome, everything else will sort of fall in line, sort of like, imagine there is a chain just coiled and dropped on the ground. And the end of the chain, the whole chain is metal, gray, silver, what do you call it? Metal. And at the end, there's one green link, right? And the green link represents money. And they seem to think that, okay, if I just grab that green link and pull it up off the ground, everything else will sort of fall in line, and then I'll be good. And something of a metaphor, not my most developed one, but I think you could follow the idea that I'm trying to share, in that most men think, as long as I get that outcome, everything else will take care of itself. And it's just not the case. There will come to the point, and I myself have experienced this, there comes a point where you start saying, okay, at this particular crossroads of my development, I could either go this way and make more money, or I can go this other way and fill in some of the deficiencies of my life. And I've experienced that, I experience that still to this day regularly, where I am opting not for more profit, but more balance, more development. And that sort of clarity, the ability to say no to a money-making opportunity, only comes from an understanding of who one is and where one's supposed to be headed. Sometimes the best answer of all the opportunities in front of you is money. And yeah, we need to accumulate resources. That's a necessary component of life, especially, if you're a man who anybody, relies on, which when you're worth a shit as a man, people tend to rely on you. If not inherently or by design systemically, then at least, when shit hits the fan for them, you're on the short list of people that they reach out to because you bring value to the table. But there will be individuals who, because they've never done the work necessary to build themselves as individuals, they're always opting for that last link, that last rung in the ladder. If I have the money, everything else will resolve itself. How many stories have we all heard of the very common athletes, grew up, bad upbringing, no real stability in their home, in their life, but had this just, worldly talent that they wind up, entering some professional league and getting paid just this incredible amount of money to play this game, and their life goes to shit despite having all of this money. The idea, or the stories that I'm sure you've heard of lottery winners, people who had nothing, win a couple $1 million, and within a few years' time, if that, they're worse off than when they started it, with many of them sharing that they wish they had never won that money, and that winning that money was the worst thing that ever happened to them. It's like, how does that work? How does it work? Especially if you're somebody who doesn't understand this process that I'm articulating, who's still looking at it like maybe those individuals did when they first got the money, like, oh, this is great, nothing's wrong. It's like, yeah, one of my sayings I've said before is the worst thing to give bad habits is a bigger budget. The worst thing to give bad habits is a bigger budget. And I mean that figuratively and literally. We don't want more opportunity to destroy ourselves if we have not squared away the formulas to build ourselves, right? So when you have an individual who hasn't done that work, an individual that hasn't, created that relationship with himself, what winds up happening? Well, a couple of things. Number one, they wind up building alliances, right? Because one of the things you'll notice about somebody who hasn't built this understanding of who he is, he also hasn't invested in building the value that he inherently possesses. He hasn't worked to educate himself. He hasn't worked to build a relationship with his body. He hasn't he hasn't invested enough time in himself to where he actually sees himself as good company, to himself. Yet, one of the things that this individual is going to start doing is building alliances to get those resources. Because one thing about somebody who isn't worth a shit, they need to rely on other people, and they will start to build alliances. This individual, type of person I'm talking about, will start building alliances. But the thing about these alliances is because the allies are anchored to this underdeveloped, erratic, inconsistent, malleable identity, it's very hard for these individuals who haven't done the work to develop that self-alliance. It's very hard for them to be good allies, good and bad in reference to being on mission or off mission within the framework of that alliance. How could I be a good partner in this friendship if I don't even know who I am? If who the friend or the ally thinks that they've connected to does not actually exist. Maybe it was just a snapshot that they were exposed to at the moment where they established this alliance. But, once that moment had passed, whatever the underdeveloped individual, happens to be exposed to at the moment creates different snapshots from beat to beat of who he is. I think when we look at an individual who hasn't done that work, they will find a way to use their environment as a sort of protective mechanism for their fragile, vulnerable, underdeveloped identity. Much like a turtle would need a shell, right? Without that shell, they're too vulnerable. They're too exposed. I would say an individual should be building himself up. So there needing to be this external protective force or external protective environment. When you look at the thumbnail for today, I thought it was a pretty cool image, that image of the individual in the woods with that circle around him. If you've read TRIBALNOMICS, there is a concept that I introduced called the wall of self, right? It's really the wall of identity. In this application, it happens to be at the self scale. There's also the wall of tribe, the wall of alliance, but the wall of self pertaining to the individual. When you have developed that wall, one of the things that I think that we need to realize is that it's not an isolationist philosophy. It's not develop yourself and your relationship with yourself to the point where you don't need to connect with anybody or you don't need to. It's establish the relationship with yourself to the point where you are a functional individual without relying upon other identities to make up your own. If I need other people for me to feel good about me, that is a vulnerability that I've allowed to become systemic. In that image of the thumbnail, it is, and I use the prompt. I think it was man meditating in the woods, and then surrounded by an aura bubble or something like that, and looking for the right terminology to get the right imagery. I'm not good at this yet, but I plug away at it for an hour or two until I get it right. But it's the exact image that I wanted to portray when it came to this idea of identity being this circle around us. It's not a wall in a sense that it is meant to keep you in, keep others out, and keep the two of you separated from one another, even in communication. Like some sort of isolationist approach to living. Not at all. The idea of it is, in the beginning, it may very well be that, until you get to the point where it becomes strong enough that it becomes more translucent, transparent, And it just winds up becoming the lens through which you look at the outside world. So if you look at that thumbnail image, I thought that that was captured pretty effectively. You know, you want to have the mindset that I want to continue to invest in myself. And being that I'm going to continue to invest in myself, I need to expose myself to new environments. I need to expose myself to new stressors, to new stimuli. You know, I need to expose myself to these things that are going to motivate, empower me to continue the development of myself as an individual. I become more valuable then. When I'm more valuable and I'm more consistent in my approach to building that value, I become a better ally. When I'm a better ally, I start building better alliances. When I can build better alliances, that becomes the collection of me and my contacts, my environment, my tribe that can actually go and engage the world in pursuit of resources. You wind up actually being more functional as an individual, again, when you get these things in order, right? So build yourself first. Let's see. All right, what do we got here? Big Dog, what up? Cherrytown Vibes says, facts, I was going through your channel. You've been going hard for years on a person building himself, being responsible, accountable, plus driven. You know, right on. Yeah, I've been doing this for a minute. With the chain link reference, are you equating that to the importance of mastery? Well, you know, I've heard a lot of people describe mastery, and it's one of those things where, you know, I think it's worth an individual building his own relationship with how he wants to look at what mastery is. You know, maybe following some criteria. What's the criteria of mastery? I would say you're somebody who is of use to people on the ladder of development in a particular discipline. At a minimum, right? You're somebody who, you know, on my TRIBALNOMICS page, months back, I shared an article on the Feynman principle. And the idea of it, and tribalnomics.com is the site. It's under articles. If you guys, I mean, there's videos on it. You don't got to go to my freaking article. But it's really an approach to mastery that if I had to choose one of all the models or frameworks that I've been exposed to over the years, that is the one. It is get exposed to a discipline and then look for somebody who also wants to learn it that knows less than you, and begin sharing that with them. Begin sharing, you know, that information, because sharing that information, and this is the Feynman method, sharing that information will expose the gaps in understanding that you currently have, and it will sort of start to articulate what you need to go and work on next. It's like, what was I unable to transfer to this individual? Well, that is something that I need to go and develop a better relationship with, so I can then be equipped to transfer that, you know, in the future, moving forward. So with that, you know, mastery, we could say, is building your ability to transfer higher levels of understanding of a particular discipline, right? So it is empowering. It is taking the seat, being able to play the role in the dynamic of master and apprentice. Years ago, when I changed my title to master, because that's how it happens, by the way, you know, it's like, don't let anybody tell you differently. It wasn't chosen from the heavens that somebody should be called, you know, master or any other title. It is a tribal rank, basically. And the reason I chose that particular term is because it is in the spirit of presenting myself in that master-apprentice dynamic and committing myself. When one assumes that role in his alliance, there is an obligation to continue to develop my relationship with a particular discipline, because, as I just mentioned, I need to continue to be able to transfer this information for those that are lower on the ladder than I happen to be, that are looking to me for guidance. So mastery is the climbing of that ladder, being able to equip ourselves at a higher and an increasingly valuable level of transferring that information to somebody else. to use the jiu-jitsu analogy, and those of you guys that Big Derek, another incredible jiu-jitsu practitioner, my man Derek, what up? Good to see you. Cherrytown Vibe is one of my students, and the thing is, to use the jiu-jitsu reference or analogy, it takes a certain level of jiu-jitsu practitioner to teach white belts. It takes another level of jiu-jitsu practitioner to teach black belts. If you add on top of that, see, there are some black belts that are obsessed with teaching white belts. I need to teach the white belts because they need to learn properly. Then, okay, that's fine. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. What I will say is teaching white belts is a certain point where I'm going to give you guys a little strategy too, a little insight into my parenting methodology where this is concerned. But when you are teaching white belts, you are removing the opportunity that lesser belts may have to teach those white belts, improving their relationship with jiu-jitsu specifically. Meaning, if you get a blue belt to assist or help or even teach and guide a white belt, that blue belt is on an accelerated pace. Now, where this starts to get a little erratic is when you start adding, rank, status, and obligation on top of that opportunity to teach the lower belt. That's where a lot of times you wind up reaching a point of diminishing returns, where even though he's getting exposed to more and more of a relationship, a deeper relationship with jiu-jitsu, I'll continue to use that example, he also starts to feel the heaviness of his obligation. And that is one of the things you want to sort of keep from sort of reducing or impeding his growth. So give him the opportunity to explain things, but don't put the weight of the world in terms of responsibility along with it. Right. So a little bit of an insight there. How I do this with my children. I'll give you one example. There's many such examples, but one example is right now I do pad work with my sons, but my youngest son is responsible for doing pad work with his sister. Every once in a while, I'll do a little impromptu. Hey, put your hands up. Show me this. Show me this. Show me this. But part of my youngest son's job is to teach his younger sister the combinations and techniques and stuff that we work on individually, he and I do. Why am I doing this? To empower his relationship with the material by putting him in a position where he can convey it to somebody else, right? So this is an incredibly powerful way to increase one's ability to build a relationship with a discipline. Now, sinking this into the topic of the talk where we're building ourselves, it's not, just get to know yourself. It's not, see yourself. It's not, pressure yourself necessarily. It's build yourself. Now, all those other things I mentioned are components of this overarching build mission, right? So when we're building ourselves, there is an expectation, if you are going to subscribe to that building of the self at first philosophy, there is an expectation that you should be becoming more. Those of you that have seen my Master the 24-Hour Cycle program, I talk about the TRIM framework. And the I in the TRIM framework is improvement. I won't go into depth with that. If you haven't gotten that program, it's a $47 program that you can get for free. You just have to go to my site and sign up for my free email list. And the first thing when you put an email gets sent to your inbox that has a promo code to get this program for free. So what I'm referencing, you can get the whole program for free right now if you want. But improvement, there's a reason why that's in the template that I put on my every single day approach to managing my time. If I don't systemically engage improvement rituals, I expose myself to the potential, to the vulnerability that I will become distracted with other elements of my life. So there are things that in order to keep myself disciplined, I have to commit to a structure, to a framework. Because if I commit to the framework and the framework is squared away, the framework is valuable, then I don't have to maintain the bandwidth and discipline to stay committed to every single component individually of the framework. It's sort of like, hey, I need to exercise today. Some of us, we could just walk outside and exercise. Some of us, we got some exercise equipment in our house. We could just do that. Yet there are other people, and I am like this in phases, where I need to go to a gym. They need to go to a gym because if they go to the gym, they'll do all the stuff that they need to do in a gym. So sometimes these templates allow us to sort of leverage our bandwidth, where we just have to stay committed to this one structure, this one system, and the system will take care of all the individual components that left to their individual relationships. You may, have some of them fall by the wayside. The guy who winds up making $1 million business, but his wife leaves him, or his kids don't talk to him, or he's 350 pounds and he's a type 2 diabetic. And, like whatever the case is, or the guy that wants to work out all day and he's all about spending time with his family, but his wife has to get a second job because they can't make the mortgage payments because he's not generating enough money. Like there is a balance to be found. And, in that balance, we start with priority, right? Let's see what else we got here. All right, Zuli, what's up? Is it Zuli? Zulai? Zuli? Sully? All right. So, I don't know. I don't want to end it there, but I will if I need to. Any questions on that? Again, if you guys haven't read the book, I would suggest you go and do that. You could probably even go back on my YouTube channel, and there'll be, videos referencing a lot of this stuff. But, whether it's me or you're following somebody else's framework, there is an idea that, people invent things. And when you're somebody, like I didn't invent anything that I'm speaking about. I'm not so arrogant or so deceptive to sit here and suggest that I invented these new truths. It's like, no, these are all just framings. These are, I made this look this way, right? And if you have, I'll share with you a tangent from the tangent, right? I remember being in Brazil, and I was in my buddy's. He was renting today would be like an Airbnb, but he was renting this apartment. He was down in Brazil. He was a painter, super, super talented dude. And on the balcony, a couple of us were hanging out there. This is in Rio, right across the street from the beach. And he's painting this like moonlight, landscape. It was incredible. The guy was just an incredible painter. And I was fascinated by his talent. And I asked him, one of the things I asked him was, it always fascinates me, how you make everything seem so appealing, almost to where it adds an element that the actual scene itself may not have. And he told me that, well, with a painter, it's not what they include, but it's when they look at the landscape, and it's what they choose to remove. So it's sort of like what he allowed to exist separate from those other aspects is how he interpreted his lens. So all that being said, I know I didn't want to go from a tangent to a tangent, but yeah, I'm back. So invention, the guys that think they're inventing things. If you look at the etymology of the word invent, right, or invention, the root of how that word came to be was based on words that meant find or discover. So originally, even when somebody was considered an inventor, it was the equivalent to saying he was somebody who pursued discoveries that were waiting to be discovered. He was finding relationships that always existed, just that nobody in this particular society or tribe of people ever knew about. Just the way, Columbus discovered America and he discovered all the motherfuckers living here too, right? So when we say discovered, when we say invented, it's very similar to that idea of the individual who just found relationships that he did that nobody else managed to sort of figure out existed. All right. So, in jiu-jitsu, it's one of these things where, oh, I invented this new system. I invented this. You didn't fucking invent anything. You decided to pick a collection of moves that have always existed because the human anatomy hasn't changed, in the last 100 years, however long jiu-jitsu has been around. What you did was you just picked things that already existed and you put them in a framework and you name the framework. But to say you invented it, and there's reasons, obviously, people say they've done this. Saying you invented is just inaccurate, right? Now, I have moves that in my academy are called the chin bar, the chin pass, right? The chin choke. There's a bunch of things. Now, why do I do that? Because I am incredibly arrogant. I may be, but that's not why I named it. I named that because it's just the value of language and terminology within a group. It's like when I say this, it's just easier to reference. It's why all Danaher's people, use Japanese, terminology for positions and techniques. It's because there's an entire system that already exists that they're just tapping into and leveraging. I just don't want to learn Japanese. So I hope that makes sense. All right, guys, let's call it there. Build yourself first. All the relevant links are in the description. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me. I'm here every Wednesday, and I hope you guys enjoyed this talk. Go to masterchim.com, get on the email list. Make sure you're getting those emails. They're free. You could also get that program. Like I said, promo code sends to you all automatically and all that stuff. Don't ask me to explain it in too much detail. I had people figure that out for me. Shout out White Boy Pat. But I will be here next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. I appreciate you all. And as always, brothers and sisters, pressure to power.